introductory remarks that I need to provide. So, good morning. My name's Toby Williams. I'm the Development and Compliance Manager for the East team, which is part of the Joint Planning Service. I'm the chair of this meeting, and I'd like to welcome you all to today's briefing for Botanic Place. This briefing allows councillors to see and understand the nature of an anticipated revised Section 73 application for the site, and the summary details of which have been set out in the briefing note forwarded to councillors by the council's case officer, Juma Ahmed. Juma, do you want to just say hello so everyone knows who you are?
Hello, everybody. You can see me down here somewhere.
So Juma's the case officer that will be reviewing and assessing the planning application when it comes into the council. The briefing will be led by the developer team, Socius, and their consultants, and will be structured with a 20 to 30 minute slot for a presentation, followed by a similar slot for questions. And in a moment, I'll ask the developer team to introduce themselves. But first, some housekeeping points. The meeting's being recorded, and members should treat the meeting as if it is a public meeting. The details of the meeting can be subject to a freedom of information request or similar. Can I ask all participants to keep themselves muted and to keep your backgrounds blurred unless you're invited to speak? If members would like to ask a question or get the attention of the chair, raise your virtual hand in Teams. We'll deal with questions at the end of the presentation. Members of Planning Committee should not express an opinion on any aspect of today's presentation, which might give rise to a view that you have a closed mind to the proposal. The recording of the meeting will be available for public viewing for 6 months following today's date. Okay, so I'm just going to check the chat, see if there's anything in the chat. Great. So if members could turn off their cameras, and then if the developer team could introduce yourselves and begin your presentation, please.
Great. Well, many thanks, Toby and Juma, and hello all. Good to see you again. Thank you for your time today. So I'm Doug Higgins, Development Director at Socius. I'll pass over to my colleagues and some of the team to introduce themselves, perhaps starting with Liam.
Hello, my name's Liam Ronan-Clond. I'm Head of Engagement and Social Value at Socius.
I'm Elida Ubbo. I'm one of the directors at Socius.
I'm Ashley Roderick. I'm Senior Project Manager also with Socius.
And AHMM?
I'll go next. Yeah, hi, I'm Thomas Gardner. I'm a Director at Alford Hall Monaghan Morris Architects.
Hi, I'm Patricia Ribeiro. I'm an Associate Director, also part of the architect team at AHMM.
And Hawley, Jamin?
Sorry, I was on mute. Hi, I'm Jamin Shah from Hawley. We're the MEP designers on the scheme.
Great. So what I'll do, I'll share my screen now and bring up the presentation, and I'll go to full screen. So hopefully everyone can see that okay? Is that coming up on the screens? Yeah, please shout if there are any issues, but I'm assuming everyone can see that. So yeah, many thanks. This is to run through our proposed minor material amendment for the existing consent on Botanic Place. So here's the team. We've obviously had a few introductions. You'll recognise a lot of the names there. And just to set the scene, Railpen acquired the site from Pace Investments in about September last year. So they're the investor sort of going forward for this scheme. And as you might be aware, they are a pension fund. They are here for the long term. So there is the sort of justification for an investment in good quality materials that stand the test of the time, creation of a wonderful sort of long-term sustainable community, and buildings that operate efficiently, because obviously this is an asset for Railpen for the long term, for the income for their pension funds. And as I said earlier, Socius appointed as their development manager to deliver this. So this is the agenda for this presentation. We'll just sort of start with our vision for Botanic Place, a recap of the existing consent, scope of the minor material amendment and proposed enhancements, summary of those benefits. We'll finish with the sort of target program, and then obviously time for Q&A. So this is our vision for Botanic Place. We want these office buildings to be the most sustainable and intelligent office buildings in the UK outside of London. Why is intelligent important? We also all know why sustainability is important, but intelligence is important, not only because it delivers a fantastic user experience, but it allows the buildings to operate more efficiently, so they can actually respond to how the buildings are being used, so that when they're not being used, or their floor is empty, for example, or low density, then the plant can adjust accordingly, and the lighting can adjust, and the ventilation works such that the plant only sort of kicks in as and when it's needed, rather than just operating like a lot of buildings that are just sort of running almost at full tilt the whole time. So that has huge advantages in terms of the operational energy, which I'll come on to later. So just a recap on the existing planning permission. So it's consent to retain the Flying Pig pub, which you can see illustrated on Hills Road there, with a private garden, and essentially 2 new office buildings, Building B and Building C, alongside Building A, Botanic House, which is, you'll be aware, is the existing Mills and Reeve building that's about sort of 12 years. So obviously that's staying very much as it is. So the development site is all here to the south of Botanic House, with a double basement, substantial sort of car parking. You can see the ramp here on the left-hand side, and just a sort of 3D stack there. So these are just some of the old images you might recall from the existing consent. Again, this is looking from the top of Station Road. So you've got the existing Botanic House and Mills and Reeve in it there. You can see the retained Flying Pig in the sort of foreground with Building B and Building C. And just zooming in a little bit more there, so you get a sort of a closer up view, just glimpsing Botanic House there on the right-hand side. This is a view looking north now up Hills Road. So this is the sort of southeast corner of Building C. So moving on to the scope of our minor material amendment, or Section 73 application. What are the proposed changes? So what we've done here is a sort of 3D model where effectively all the grayed out areas are areas that are remaining as per the existing consent, and we've highlighted only the areas that we're proposing to amend. So predominantly that is the basement and reducing that, and I'll come on to that in a bit more detail. A few tweaks to the ground floor layouts and public realm. Even smaller tweak to the roof levels, and then we're proposing a single phase instead of a 2-phase build program. So what areas are not being affected? Well, everything else really. So the Flying Pig, obviously we're retaining that as per the existing consent. We've got consented building heights and massing, their footprints and the facades are all remaining as per the existing permission. And we can also demonstrate there's no impact on the key views, which again, I'll come on to a bit later. So starting with the basement, the existing consent has a huge double basement, 200 car parking spaces down there, massive embodied carbon footprint, huge dig, which has an impact on construction program and disruption for local communities and roads, which we would like to improve. How are we improving that? Well, we're going to reduce it significantly, sort of 10,000 cubic meters of dig being saved. It's not quite halving the volume of that basement, mostly because we're relocating the servicing down there. So by having the servicing, the refuse vehicles and all the rest going down into the basement, there are huge benefits to the public realm and the enjoyment of that space and the pedestrian experience, the arrival experience there. So unfortunately, because we've got some sort of rather large refuse lorries that have to go down there, the basement does have to be fairly deep. So we've effectively got a sort of half floor in there. But there are significant savings in terms of embodied carbon. We're reducing the car parking from about 200 spaces down to about 70 spaces. And as a result, we're enhancing not just the quantum, but the quality of the cycle parking and end of journey facilities. So this is a basement floor plan. You can see the consented scheme on the left-hand side there. This is the lower basement level. So you've got all the car parking there, highlighted in orange on the left-hand side, and our proposed basement on the right-hand side, where again, that's all the car parking there that you can see in orange. So there's only about sort of 70 spaces, and then bicycle parking and end of journey facilities, and I'll come on to a bit more sort of detail in terms of the arrival experience there, and effectively the rest is servicing and bins and plant predominantly. Just going up one level, so we've got, this is the sort of upper level of basement in the existing planning permission, where you can see the bicycle parking again in pink and some additional car parking in orange. And this is effectively our sort of lower mezzanine level in our reduced basement. So again, extensive bicycle parking and end of journey facilities, all in pink, and a bit of F&B space on the lower ground, which will actually benefit from a lot of natural light by virtue of a void, which we've introduced on the ground floor. In terms of 3D, so the bicycle parking has been a huge focus here. The existing consent had what was acknowledged to be a rather sort of dangerous bicycle ramp that curved around the vehicle ramp. It was a single point of entry, and yeah, not an ideal. So what we're doing here is we're putting bicycle parking front and center of the scheme, slap bang in the middle between building B and building C, 2 dedicated entrances with their own bicycle friendly stairs and ramps, and also their own bicycle friendly lifts as well, so 1 per building. So that has huge improvements in terms of user experience, in terms of security. You could just see how it allows for this sort of extra volume here in double height space, where we're proposing a bike doctor. So this is again a sort of visualization of what that might look like. We are also looking at how these ramps might deliver some assistance as well for heavier bikes, for people sort of taking them up the stairs. But they're going to be a very gentle incline. We're designing them such that, that both the ramps and the stairs will be very bicycle friendly, with input from our specialists at 5 at Heart. And that would deliver a really outstanding cyclist experience. Moving up to the ground floor and the public realm. So as before, we've got the consented on the left-hand side and the proposed enhancements on the right-hand side. So again, you can see the dedicated entrances there for cyclists off that sort of central space. You can see some additional planting and trees to reflect the fact we're not pulling service vehicles into this space now. And you can just see how, sorry, I should mention that the blue here is office space, the purple is sort of F&B and retail, and the yellowish space is our reception areas. So you can see how we're consolidating a lot of the F&B into building B, and there's a sort of reduced sort of reception area. Still a bit of sort of co-working space, but no sort of significant changes there. You could just see a slight change to the sort of vehicle ramp in that sort of southeast corner, and the introduction of a new security office that would just provide that additional security and oversight of the vehicle ramp. In terms of the market hall and sort of F&B space that we're looking at in building B, we are engaging already with a number of really exciting operators for this space that we see a sort of market hall or food hall offer. that has lots of exciting, interesting sort of food stalls and kitchens offering a range of different cuisines, craft beers and spirits, but it also can offer, importantly, lots of different sort of events and activities, everything from live music, yoga, wonderful events for local schools, but it becomes a very sort of democratic, sort of open, flexible space, exactly like you can see here in the Seven Dials Market in London, where anyone can come along and they can sit down. You can't reserve a table, and you make friends, you socialise, you grab something to eat from one of the many sort of food stalls there. And it's a really exciting, vibrant space that is there and is open to the public, and totaling about 25,000 square feet at the moment. So that's in addition to all the wonderful new public realm that we'll be delivering. In terms of the public realm, these are the enhancements that we're looking at. So I've already mentioned the trees and that sort of central space between buildings B and C. Now that we're not pulling service vehicles into this area, the enhanced sort of cyclist arrival experience. We've got some additional greening on the southeast corner, which I'll come on to in a bit more. And we're looking at how we can further enhance the proposed new trees fronting Hills Road to deliver some sort of larger, more impressive trees such as London Planes. These are just some images of what that might look like. So you could just, this is an image here focusing on that sort of central space with a sort of rather impressive London Plane there in the sort of foreground, and building B on the right and building C on the left. And that view with just a glimpse of sort of Botanic House on the right-hand side there, and the Flying Pig in the foreground. These are just some views of the terraces, because there is substantial greening and wonderful planting at the terrace levels as well, to help enhance the overall sort of greening of the site and the biodiversity, and really trying to encourage the users of those buildings to make good use and enjoy those outdoor spaces. I mentioned the new green wall that we're proposing. So on this southeast corner, which is a very sort of prominent corner as you approach from the south along Hills Road, we've got, we think it's an excellent location for a sort of living green wall, and we make really quite a nice sort of feature and a sort of, and that's really a sort of important arrival point for a lot of pedestrians, cyclists, and vehicles who might be parking there. Going up to the roof levels, so this is, again, the consent on the left-hand side with the 7th floor of building B there and the 5th floor of building C illustrated below, just because we got those sort of different heights. And you can see there's a straight sort of swap, we managed to consolidate a bit of that sort of roof plant, and we're just looking at a bit of office space within the same volume and massing of the existing buildings. So what does that look like in terms of sections? So you can just see here, this is the long section from the west, from Botanic Garden. So the consented scheme at the top there, we've just got sort of plants at the moment, and then our proposed sort of section here where you could just see a bit of an introduction of the offices, trying to introduce a similar sort of facade design, so as not to be seen as a radical departure from the existing consent, but importantly it's all within the existing volume, so there's no change in building height or massing, and we can also illustrate that in the verified views. So these are the same verified views in the original planning application that was consented. So again, it's a bit of a case of spot the difference here, but you can see there's no impact with the consented scheme on the left and the proposed scheme on the right. And again, this is another verified view, 18A, consented on the left, proposed on the right. And lastly, one more, this is 21A, with again just illustrating that there's no impact on these important views. In terms of phasing, so the existing consent allowed for a two-phase approach, two-phase build. So building B was built And then once that was completed, construction would start on building C. So looking at an extensive build program that given where we are today, we'll be looking at delivery in sort of late 2028. As per the existing consent, what we're proposing is a single phase approach. So both buildings are delivered together. That allows us to compress the build program significantly to about 33 months. So almost a 2-year saving there on the build program. So significantly less disruption to the local community and roads. So summary of benefits, I mean, a huge focus has been on environmental sustainability. So you've got, this is a nice sort of bar chart where effectively you've got 3 bars per section. So the left-hand bar is the existing site. The middle bar is the existing planning permission, and the right-hand bar is our proposed amendments. So you can see huge decrease in car parking. You can see cycle parking increased over and above even the existing planning permission, going well above local policy requirements. In terms of public realm, again, enormous improvement over the existing, and even a substantial improvement over the existing consent, just in terms of sort of area of public realm. And then in terms of green spaces as well, a slight sort of uplift in terms of what's consented at the moment. In terms of accreditations, still very much committed to achieving BREEAM Outstanding as per the existing consent, but there's some additional ones that we're targeting, such as Wide Score and Smart Score to deliver those sort of intelligent buildings, Cycle Heart Rating to deliver that wonderful cyclist experience. So it's not just about the parking and the arrival, that's also looking at the lockers, the showers, the changing areas, and you know the precise sort of specification of those spaces. WELL Platinum, which I'll come on to in a bit, and also neighbours. So sort of 5-star is our sort of baseline. We're looking how we can go beyond that. So there's a huge focus on operational energy and a commitment to actually measure how these buildings will perform in real life once they're built and operational. So BREEAM, you can see how in terms of the baseline, which is the dark purple, we're easily achieving outstanding, but actually there are some additional credits, largely attributable to innovation, that might enable us to go even further. So BREEAM, we're extremely sort of strong on that. And again, well, you know, comfortably achieving sort of gold, but we're looking at, again, how we can achieve platinum to deliver that wonderful buildings that really look after people's sort of health and well-being. So as I mentioned, huge focus on operational energy. This just compares the consented scheme you've got here, and I guess it's sort of business as usual versus where we're targeting in terms of sort of UK GBC targets. So again, baseline there in purple. Comfortably achieving neighbours 5-star and UK GBC 2030 targets, but actually we're looking, you know, aspirationally we're looking how we could go that much further and reduce that, and that's everything by looking at the ventilation strategy, the cooling, the efficiencies of the facades, reducing solar heat gain is all being explored extensively at the moment. In terms of embodied carbon, so we've got embodied carbon on the top there and whole life carbon on the bottom, just looking at where we sit relative to LETI targets and RIBA targets. And again, it's this is very sort of early stages, still conducting this modelling, but I think we're feeling confident that we're on target to achieve at least RIBA 2030 and sort of going beyond. Obviously, we're looking at fairly sort of traditional materials here, but there are all sorts of innovative ways of delivering that significantly reduces the carbon impact of construction. In terms of water, this is obviously a very hot topic in Cambridge at the moment. Again, you can see business as usual is 16 litres per person per day. Our baseline is reducing that to 13, but actually we'd like to see that how we can reduce that even further to 10 litres. And again, in terms of sort of BREEAM, we're scoring outstanding sort of credits there. because we got the blue roofs, the rainwater harvesting, grey water harvesting and recycling as well. So really reducing that water consumption. Mentioned a sort of target program, so we're looking at this submission of the Section 73 application at the end of this month, and we'll be getting vacant possession of the site around about October this year, at which point we'd look to commence a demolition contract. And on the assumption of again a single phase approach, we're looking at completion of the build by the end of 2026. Thank you very much. And I'll open it to the floor for any questions.
Thanks, Doug. That was a really good presentation, very clear. So, members, any questions?
Yes, please, Toby.
Go for it, Dave.
Hello? Yes, please.
Yeah, do you want to ask a question, Dave?
Sorry,
Dave, can you hear me? Do you want to ask a question?
Sorry, I had a minor blip. My question's really about how you're going to do all this without disrupting the traffic in Cambridge. I should be aware, but I'm not quite aware of a transport plan. But this is a major route into Cambridge at a time when potentially the County Council will be making massive moves to reduce the flow of cars through Cambridge and increase the speed of buses. And I just wondered, you're going to be moving a lot of soil, you're going to be moving a lot of debris. Just wondered what the plan is.
Yeah, so we will be submitting a construction management plan with a Section 73 application that is, again, working on the assumption of a single phase approach, as I said, so reducing that construction program by 21 months versus the existing consent. So already that is a significant improvement over the existing consent. And of course, we're looking at all opportunities in terms of modern methods of construction to deliver sort of prefabricated or sort of offsite materials, such as the facades, which could be again delivered and fabricated sort of offsite, which would reduce sort of disruption and vehicle movements. So we'll be submitting that as part of the Section 73, and that will set out the sort of detail of the proposed vehicle movements. But I think by just moving from reducing the volume of the basement alone, as I said, saves about 10,000 cubic meters of dig and soil and muck away. So that has a significant improvement in terms of vehicle movements. And then also moving from a two-phase approach to a single-phase build has further improvements, just reducing the extent of that disruption.
Yeah, I understand that completely, but there still will be a lot of traffic, and I just wondered if, when you do your transport plan, whether you can think about avoiding the rush hour. That's one for you to take away, not to.
I think it's we know it's if that were the case, to avoid rush hour, it would have an impact of just extending the program. So although it might not impact rush hour, the impact on the overall program could be significant, and something in the order of 4 to 6 months extension to the program by reducing the hours for those vehicle movements. So although it might have a sort of improvement just for the sort of rush, peak traffic movements, actually the length of the overall program is significantly increased as a result. So there'll be arguably sort of no net benefit there.
Yeah, I understand that completely, but my point is that potentially, and this is only potentially, we will be introducing a controversial traffic management plan for the whole city. And we would be perhaps a little concerned if the amount of lorries on Hills Road were to confuse this. So I'll just leave that with you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Great, thank you, Doug, thank you, Dave. Councillor Katie Pora, you have a question?
Thank you very much. I think it's welcome, the reduced build, the reduced car parking, the grey water use, and the basement, as you said, that is saving considerable amount of stuff. So I had a few questions. Could I just check, you mentioned the bicycle lifts, are they for sort of adapted bikes and cargo bikes? Are they big enough, I suppose? Because as committee now, I always like to ask about cargo bike parking, because, you know, if you're employing people in Cambridge, they will be dropping their kids at school and then bringing their bikes in. So I wondered if you could just comment on your plans for having outsized bike spaces, and obviously whether you're liaising with CamCycle, who are obviously quite a useful stakeholder in this process. I wanted to ask whether with the parking you consider car club parking, you know, because one of our incentives is to try and help people share cars if they need to. I'm assuming there'll be EV charging. I'm pretty sure that was in the previous consent, wasn't it? I can see Doug nodding. It's welcome to have bigger trees. Obviously, I hope you're talking to our tree officer, just because obviously in terms of root space and things, we want to make sure those trees can thrive. And although obviously you'd be required to replace them in the first 5 years, we want to make sure they're sustainable for the long term. And I just wondered if you could comment in terms of the flying pig. I know that's pretty much staying as it is. I'm assuming that, you know, we were very keen in the original application to make sure the pub was supported to return to business. So I don't know if you've got any comments about that. Thanks very much.
Great, many thanks, Katie. Yes, firstly on the cargo bikes, yes, the lifts are sized so they can accommodate cargo bikes. That's obviously very important because we wouldn't expect people to take them down the ramps because of their size and weight. So that's been an important factor in specifying those lifts. On the car club bays, that's absolutely something we can explore. I'm fully in favour of that. Yes, all the car parking in that sort of basement will have EV charging facilities. We'll certainly start to engage with some potential sort of operators for those car club bays to see where those can be accommodated. I know that's something we're obviously already looking at on Devonshire Gardens, so we'll you know, marry those up. In terms of trees, we have had a pre-app meeting with a landscape officer who is supportive in principle of the tree planting. We're looking at how we can mix in lime trees with larger sort of London planes, which we've been encouraged to explore as well, and just sort of seeing where the various sort of species, where it's appropriate to have those species essentially. And then lastly on the pub, you might be aware we're running through a bit of a co-design exercise at the moment with Cambridge Imagination. So we're essentially been an exercise run over the last sort of 3 months really, with a number of co-design workshops, inviting in local stakeholders and groups and organisations, including the Hatfields, who obviously previously operated the pub, and just sort of inviting in people's ideas as to what they see as being the future for that pub. And it's a very interesting exercise. We're very happy to share the outcome of that exercise in terms of the feedback we got from those individuals and groups, and that's going to inform a sort of brief essentially for that pub going forward. But essentially, I mean, there was obviously a lot of support to see it become something a bit more inclusive and not just a sort of a return to precisely what it was in the past, but we want to make sure that it's something that is well loved and well used and is inviting for everyone, but still a sort of nice nod to what it was in the past. But we're very much conducting a sort of listening exercise on that at the moment.
Thanks very much.
Thank you, Bert. Jenny, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I was going to actually ask about the flying pig, and you partly answered that's one of my questions. I was concerned about competition from the new market hall type space that you're proposing with the Flying Pig, and how community oriented it would be, how public. We also have St Paul's, which is like a community centre nearby. So it's a kind of competition with nearby offerings, existing businesses. I'm really pleased to see, it'd be really interesting if you could share the details of your work on what the Flying Pig could look like. So very pleased to see that. I wondered about security for the cycle users, and security of cycles. And I know you've got the security office on the corner, but it is a big issue at the moment. So are you intending to have a security office by the stairs, down in the basement? Or, from the food and beverage area down there? And I wanted a bit more details about that. How open are the roof terraces? That's the other thing I wanted to know. Also, the number of office users you're expecting. I wasn't involved in the original planning application, so this is new to me. And how you would go from achieving the targets you've got to the aspirational ones. And I wondered whether there was any solar PV or thermal panels in the building, on the building. And I also wondered about the impact on the botanical garden. Is this improved by having a slightly shallower basement as you're proposing? Yeah, and I wondered on the carbon levels, what is the pale blue marker? You've got the dark blue and the other one, and how you would go about getting from 13 to 10 litres per day of water use. I think that's everything. Thank you. Oh, and by the way, I do support the points that Dave Agent's making.
Okay, many thanks, Jenny. In terms of the competition, we're very sort of mindful of that. We certainly don't want to be competing with some of the wonderful sort of offers that are there at the moment. We certainly don't want to be competing with the pub, whatever the future holds for that in terms of operation. So we are ensuring that whatever comes forward in terms of the market hall is complementary to the pub. So perhaps it might allow the pub to focus more on the sort of live music and the drinking, and then actually the food and beverage can be covered by the market hall, and trying to look at how they can be married up as best as possible in terms of that sort of pedestrian flow. So that actually almost becomes a sort of one-stop shop for people who just want to be there to enjoy. They've actually got a choice of a sort of area that offers sort of live music. They've got the sort of the pub garden that people can enjoy and have some drinks. Maybe there's sort of music out there, and then they can wander in to the ground floor of Building B, and they can grab a sandwich or a pizza or a glass of wine. So it's all being looked at together to ensure that there's no sort of cannibalization there effectively, and of course importantly not competing with anything outside of our boundaries in the sort of immediate vicinity. So we think it's something that's a slightly sort of different offer. There's nothing quite like it in Cambridge at the moment, and certainly some of the early initial sort of research we've conducted, this is something that is very much in demand in Cambridge. It's hugely popular in some of the other cities we're working in, such as Brighton and Bristol. I think Cambridge would really love a sort of market hall of this type, but it's precisely what that mixes of sort of food and drink and music and other activities is still very much to be determined, and we've got a long way to go into 2026 until we establish what that is, but we're just sort of setting out the rough sort of parameters of those spaces at the moment. In terms of security, very mindful of that. We have got security sort of specialists involved here at Hawley. There'll be extensive CCTV. We are looking at, as I mentioned, sort of smart buildings, so people will have sort of passes on the link to their sort of phone. They will access a lot of the doors and the gates, but obviously aware that you know, people can easily sort of tailgate certainly into the cycle storage, for example. So in terms of the cycle parking, even if someone manages to get into the secure cycle parking area, they can't get into the offices without going back out into the sort of reception areas and through the sort of security gates there, and all of that cycle parking will be monitored by CCTV as well. So it's actually going to be a very secure space. It's a significant enhancement over the existing consent in terms of that cyclist ramp, and certainly in terms of the vehicle access. Again, having we'll be having sort of bollards or sort of drop down gates, as well as that security office that will offer that sort of manned presence and oversight. So we're very conscious of security here, and that's very much a strong priority for us. In terms of terraces, I think was it in terms of how they're going to be used? Sorry, but
yes, you know, you want people to use them as much as possible.
Yeah.
And they're very divorced from what's down at street level. So at street level, it can look quite brown and hard because they're hidden up on the top. But as you're saying, you know, these are buildings for office workers and office use. I mean, it's interesting to see you've moved the plant down into the basement.
Yes. Yeah, so we are looking at extensive sort of planting up there. So there'll be nice sort of soft planting and sort of raised planters that will create sort of nicely enclosed green rooms, effectively with outdoor furniture. We might also look at potentially some sort of lightweight pergola structures or something to, again, just provide people with a bit more shelter, because we do want to encourage the future workers in these buildings to use those spaces. I mean, there'll be wonderful sort of inviting places, you know, to enjoy and to work, that will add a lot to people's well-being and enjoyment. So they're not just going to be sort of open, empty terraces. They are going to be lush. They're going to be furnished to really encourage their use. You mentioned also the Botanic Garden, and just on that sort of similar subject, and we have been engaging considerably with Professor Beverly Glover there at the Botanic Garden. Myself and some of the team here actually had a VIP tour by Professor Beverly just last week. We're really sort of listening to, you know, to all the wonderful work, getting a detailed understanding of the wonderful work they do there, and also any concerns that they have. But obviously, they acknowledge there's an existing consent. There's also acknowledgement that the reduction in the basement will have significant benefits to them. We're engaging to see how we can enhance the boundary treatment at the moment, because they don't particularly like the existing fence that's there at the moment. So we're looking at how we can enhance that and deliver something that is more aligned with some of the new fencing that they've delivered elsewhere around the garden. So there's a start of a very good neighbourly relationship there. And as I said, we've set up a series of meetings with them already that will continue all the way through to the end of construction to make sure we're listening to all their concerns. Just in terms of the targets, so obviously there's on the sort of sustainability metrics. So obviously there is extensive a lot more design work to be undertaken before we even commence construction. We're just at the early stages of the stage 3 design, so there's a lot of coordination to be done. There's a lot of further analysis and benchmarking to be done in order to understand how these buildings will operate in reality in terms of energy performance. There's some decisions in terms of the precise materials that we'll be making that will have an impact on the embodied carbon. So a lot of that is work that will be undertaken over the coming sort of 6 months. But as I mentioned, certainly in terms of the operational energy, we are committed to the NABERS accreditation, which means that we'll be measuring the real world energy performance of these buildings once they're up and running. And in terms of PV cells as well, you mentioned, yes, so there are extensive photovoltaic cells on the roofs of both buildings. I think almost the same sort of area of PV that was in the current consent, but actually we're looking at obviously the technology has moved on, so there are improved efficiencies now with modern PVs. So we're actually looking at a slight sort of increase in terms of the electricity generation from the area of PVs that we've got on the roof. And then in terms of carbon, you mentioned blue marker on the carbon, and I'll just share my screen, and perhaps Tom or Jamin, sorry, I didn't illustrate it on this slide actually, but you're absolutely right, there is a blue marker and I can't quite recall what that is now.
Yes, sorry, I'll explain that bit. So the blue marker just shows where Doug explained that we're still in the process of refining and, developing the analysis we're doing. So the blue marker shows where we currently are between our baseline and aspirational. So we're looking to push that further and further to the right on this image. Great. So that's what the blue marker represents.
Great, thanks, Jamin. Hopefully that's covered everything, Jenny.
The work on the water, how you'd get from 13 to 10 litres.
Yes. Again, that all comes down to the sort of future design and modelling and coordination that will be undertaken over the course of the 6 months. But we've got very firm sort of baseline there, and I think once we're closer to actually placing a build contract right towards the end of this year, we'll have a much sort of firmer idea of what we're actually able to deliver. But we've set out proposed strategy in terms of the grey water recycling and the rainwater harvesting and the bloom roofs in terms of the sort of volume of those tanks and how they're going to harvest and recycle that water. It's now just about the sort of detail as to how those the precise sort of volumes of water that are used and moved around the building to be able to gauge the future demand here.
Okay, has that answered all your questions, Jenny? I think Jenny may have frozen up. I'll assume that it has. So, Katie Thornbury, you have some questions.
Yeah, thank you very much for the presentation. I'm really pleased to see all the different types of compliance criteria that you are bringing into this. Really interesting. And one of my comments is that it would be great if we could all learn about these other criteria. So it's not just the design or how the building is used, it's actually going to make a difference to how the building is built. So it would be good if some of the committee could have some site visits, the critical points to understand it, but also our building control officers and planning officers. But at the end of this, will the public be able to, will we be able to understand how energy efficient the building is by monitors describing the building in use, but also understanding about the construction and how that's met, how that adds to whole life costing and things like that. So it's a kind of whole lesson about the building, but not just now, but coming in and looking around and understanding it would be great. Will we in Cambridge, we have buildings which were office buildings built 20 years ago that have been demolished, and it with huge amount of energy to demolish the building. So I'm interested in I hope this would never be rebuilt, this building, and I'd like to know about adaptability, and if there were major changes, could it be deconstructed in part and as part of the adaptability. I think the landscaping in changes have been really interesting. I'm interested in the vertical planting and also I think, you know, Doug, I'm very interested in the backdrop of the flying pig, and whether through landscaping details or opportunities, whether there's a way we could, in my opinion, enhance the backdrop of the flying pig. And again, that may be coming through in more detail in due course. And I'm really pleased. I think one of the things that is most important is really the public trust that the Flying Pig will become a thriving pub again. I think that is a really important priority for the city, and it sounds like that you've got that on your agenda, which is great. Thank you.
Many thanks, Katie. So I was having trouble unmuting myself there. Very happy to lead some site visits for yourselves, your councillors and officers, both during the course of construction and once it's built. Of course, we'd be delighted to do that. In terms of energy monitoring, yes, we're committed to that. So as part of the neighbours certification, we'll be effectively sort of publicly announcing the operational performance of those buildings. That'll be focused more on the the landlord side of things and the baseline energy performance of the buildings, because obviously depending on what tenants we have on those office floors, they will have different energy requirements. But it's very important that we get an understanding of how those buildings perform in reality versus the theoretical modelling that's being undertaken at the moment. But there's a lot of good work at the moment to really close that gap between the theory and the real world performance. And again, in terms of whole life carbon, again, once this is built, very happy to share that data with you in terms of where we think we sit in terms of that whole life carbon and embodied carbon footprint. But needless to say, there's still a lot of work to be done over the coming months to see how we can really reduce that, and there'll be a lot of obligations placed on the contractor as well to see how that can be reduced. And that leads us into adaptability and reuse. I think before we touch on reusing or understanding how the proposed buildings could be deconstructed, we should touch on how we're exploring extensively as to how we can reuse a lot of the existing materials on site with the current buildings, because obviously a lot of bricks there. We're looking at how we can reuse a lot of those bricks, and there's some interesting technologies now about how, okay, if you can't quite, some of those bricks that might unfortunately become inevitably broken or chipped during the course of deconstruction, how we can even reuse those and crush them up, and all sorts of interesting innovations around 3D printing to deliver outdoor furniture, for example, reusing some of that material. But we're looking at how we can reuse as many of those existing bricks as possible on site, either here with Botanic Place, or indeed just down the road at Devonshire Gardens, because again these projects are largely coming forward in parallel. So we're looking at both projects together to understand how materials can be reused across both sites. Perhaps Tom or Patricia, is there anything you want to touch on in terms of the reuse of the proposed buildings?
Yeah, I can touch on that. I mean, in terms of adaptability of the buildings themselves, I mean, we do a lot of work adapting current existing buildings for architecture. The key thing that always matters most is floor to floor height. And that's what makes the buildings built in the sort of 70s and 80s with their very sort of low ceilings. That's what often leads or has led to their demolition. So we're trying to get a decent floor to floor height here that allows for both opportunities for natural ventilation across the floor plate, which relates to the ratio of depth to height, and allows for flexibility in that. It's also very regular, even though the outside is curved, the inside is actually very regular. And we're looking at opportunities of creating new openings in the slabs. So there could be stairs, there could be extra risers, there could be extra light wells in there in future, if need be. So we're interested in the buildings. We want the buildings to last a long time as well, I suppose is the answer. And down in the basement, they're constructing the sort of mezzanine level as a mezzanine as part of taking that out potentially in future as car parking may fall away, and we can reuse that space for other uses as well. In terms of then sort of reusing parts of the building and other buildings, sort of circular economy principles. As Doug said, we're looking at doing that now. So not just the bricks, but some of the smaller bits, MEP light fittings, can we reuse parts of those? Raised floors, can perhaps recycle versions of those that we might use in the building. And we are considering how materials in the building, such as the glass in the facade, the precast elements on the facade in particular, can be reused. Yeah, and try and consider that with the embodied carbon. It's a part of that story and part of our overall assessment.
Great, thanks, Tom. And sorry, lastly, on the backdrop of the pub, yes, that's something we're exploring. I think as part of this exercise we're undertaking with Cambridge Imagination and the local community. I think that's largely sort of informing the future brief for that pub and how it might be operated, and there might be some slight sort of amendments to the garden, for example, or how the pub interfaces with Building B. But that's something to be considered for the future. That's not something that we're introducing as part of this Section 73 application, simply because it's an ongoing exercise and something that we've got time to address that further down the line. But we recognise that we want to not have the pub as a sort of standalone building, quite sort of separate. I mean, there is an interesting sort of juxtaposition there, but we want to see how actually there could be a better flow of for pedestrians, for users, for the community to go from the pub to Building B and vice versa, because we recognise there's at the moment they sit quite separately, which doesn't feel too comfortable.
Right, has that answered all your questions, Katie? Good. Right. Naomi, apologies, you've had your hand up for a while, but you're the last councillor to have their hand up. Naomi, are you there? Naomi, we can't hear you. There's a muffled sound. I don't know if you want to try again. I think we'll have to assume that she's got a technological problem. See, Katie Thornborough's raised her hand again. So if you've got a supplementary question, Katie.
Yes, there's what part of the S106 agreement is improvements to the Hills Road Station Road junction, and I think a lot of people will be approaching the road, might be arriving at the station and coming up and accessing the building from that part. And are you looking into the movement of people into? I'm sure you are, but I think there could be a lot coming in that direction, and it would be interesting. That's a really important junction. And it would be, again, I'm really pleased you've got the traffic management plan coming as part of this next application rather than dealing with that later. And I wondered if you're including that design in the traffic management plan, or is that already set? And I think with the aspirations we've got for active travel in the city, there could be some real, it could be a real opportunity, that junction.
I completely agree, Katie. And let me just share my screen again, just to bring up that slide. So I'll just expand this. So actually you can see hopefully in the sort of bottom middle there's just we're proposing a slight sort of relocation of the consented toucan crossing, so that it now aligns with what we see as being the sort of main arrival point from those people arriving from the east, from Station Road. So that's come slightly sort of further north, I think, from where it was, just to align, so that it's better for cyclists, better for pedestrians. We think it aligns nicely with a sort of central pedestrian way between buildings B and C, and that will also sort of form part of our application. We're also considering running a sort of fun design competition to see how that can be a slightly more interesting toucan crossing rather than just sort of black and white stripes. There are various sort of precedents around the country at the moment as to introducing slightly sort of more colourful, artistic, creative crossings that obviously deliver the same sort of function, allowing pedestrians and cyclists to cross safely, but it's something that just might add a bit of sort of colour and vibrancy and interest there. So it just could be quite a bit of a sort of fun exercise that we would want to sort of explore. But hopefully, hopefully that's what you were looking for.
Great, thank you, Doug. We'll just see if Naomi is with us. So Naomi, are you there? Doesn't seem as if she is. I think what we'll do, unless members have any other questions, we'll ask Naomi to maybe send an email with her questions, and you can respond accordingly, kind of direct to her. But I can't see any of the hands up. So just to say thank you to Socius and the consultancy team for coming here today and giving your presentation. Really, really interesting presentation. Thank you for members for attending. The application is not far away, given the schedule. So we look forward to receiving it, and we'll continue the dialogue. Thank you all for attending. Okay, goodbye.
Great.
Thank you.
Many thanks,
Thank you.
everyone.
Thank you.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Niall.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye bye.